Oh, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. All right, I'm a mess. Hello. My name is Laura, and I want to talk about the books that I read in November. And I got water everywhere. Okay. I read 9 books this month, and I had mediocre success, which has kind of been a theme since like October. I hit a peak somewhere and I have been just slumping down, which is super unfortunate. I don't know if the weather's getting to me, if I'm picking bad books, but like I have not had a 5-star in what feels like forever. I've had a couple 4s, but everything has just been so average. And I'm really hoping by the end of the year I get something. I mean, Heartstopper presumably will be a 5. I don't think I've rated any of them less than 5. But I want a novel that is going to just dig deep, right? So with all that said, here are the books I read in November. Oh, Kitty found a bird. Doesn't matter. So in order of what I read, I have 6 of them. Well, I have 7 physically. I have 6 of them. I have 6 of them with me because I finished the Crave series and it's behind me. There we go. It's on the bottom. That it barely fits stacked like that. I don't want to do it again. So Cherish is over there. It's fine. So we're gonna go over these in the order that I read them, which is of course the reverse of how I have them stacked. Great, love that for me. So the first thing I read this month was my Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, which I apparently tabbed. I don't remember doing that. It was fine. I read it from my book club. We never had the meeting. It fell out, like everyone got so busy, and I feel like December's busier, so who knows if we will ever discuss this book. But we're following a woman in the 1950s, 1960s, and she has her master's or her PhD in chemistry. And given that it's the 1960s, it's full of sexism. She is not treated as an equal at her job, and she has no interest in being a 1960s housewife. And she's really probably smarter than most of her coworkers, but she's not treated that way. And she ends up having a child, and through a series of circumstances ends up hosting a cooking show of all things, where she really focuses on the chemistry of cooking and balancing her life as a chemist and as a mother and what all of that means in the 1960s. I thought it was enjoyable. I am not well versed in science to know how accurate any of it was, but it was enjoyable. I did enjoy a lot of it. I think I actually ended up reading it in a day. And okay, so I'm looking at these, and I had some fun quotes. When is it Elizabeth? Yes. When Elizabeth is pregnant, she is talking to her doctor, and she actually, wait, is that her doctor? I think it was. No, okay. She's talking to her boss, who is a horrible person this whole time. And they're basically saying, you're pregnant, you're not married, all of this is a problem, we're gonna have to fire you because we cannot be associated with unwed pregnant women. And she's like, pregnancy's not a condition, like this is just a normal thing. Like, why are you acting like this? And her boss is like, how dare you? A woman telling me what pregnancy is? The audacity. Anyway, this was like a 3.5, 4 stars. I don't even remember what I gave it on Goodreads, and I didn't check. But my recollection of it now is like 3 or 4. It's fine. It was fun. I didn't watch the Apple TV show. That's not true. I watched like an episode and a half. It was good. I didn't finish it because I was on my dad's family plan and he canceled Apple TV. And I didn't care enough about this show to start my own Apple TV account. I heard it was a bad adaptation. My mom really liked the show but never read the book. So I think like it's probably a decent show, but not a good adaptation. So Great Assault. Then I read Ink Blood Sister Scribe by Emma Torres, I think. And I did. Actually, for all of my talk about having no good reads, this was probably my favorite or tied favorite of the month. I got this fully as just a cover buy. I thought it was beautiful. And the first chapter, or not even the first chapter, the prologue sucked me in. I was like, what is happening? I need to know. We are following two sisters, one of whom has to move every 12 months like clockwork. She can never go home. She's constantly moving. And the other sister is basically polar opposite. She's trapped at home. She has to be home every 24 hours to reset a spell in the house to keep her safe. And they're basically both living in isolation in a completely different way. The sister at home can't ever really leave because she always has to put the spell on the house. And the sister who is traveling can never go home. She can never lay down roots. She always has to be moving. And you're following them when, of course, things go awry, but also kind of figuring out the why. Why do they have to live their life this way? And it's all about the magic of the universe that they're in. There's all these books that you learn about how they're written, how they're protected, how they're read, who is affected by them, who isn't. And it was just beautiful. I was shocked that this was a debut. I was in love with the sisters from just the very beginning. And as much as I want more in this universe, I am actually so glad that this is a standalone. I think we got just enough information. The universe is contained, and I'm glad that it is not a series for the sake of it. But like, if she ever wants to go back, I will read it. But also, I will probably read her next book, whatever it is, whenever it is, because I just thoroughly loved this. The writing is beautiful. And the magic system was unique to me. I don't know, there probably is another magic system similar to it. It didn't seem particularly groundbreakingly new. I just don't read a ton of fantasy, but I really, really enjoyed this. And then I read The Paleontologist by Luc Dumas. And if you watched my vlog about this book, which is really long, because I could not figure, and it was way longer, and it was going to be even longer because I couldn't figure out what to cut, what to record. It was a hot mess. I got sick in the middle of it. Things were crazy. But this was terrible. And it was one of my most anticipated books once I found out about its existence. This is following a man who returns to his hometown many, many years after his sister's disappearance to work at the museum where his sister disappeared. And he's a paleontologist. That's hence the name. I was promised a horror story with dinosaurs. I didn't get that at all. It was really barely horrifying. And granted, I say that about a lot of horror. I'm like, oh, this isn't really scary. This isn't really horrific. I think part of it is I have a higher tolerance for what I think is horror. I do think there are things in this and in many horror books that people who are more sensitive to it would say is horrific. I think I'm jaded. But this really wasn't that scary. I had a lot of just ranting about this in that other vlog that I'm not going to repeat here, but it's heavily reliant on the coronavirus, the pandemic. I was not ready to read that again. I did not realize that was going to be such a heavy plot point. And even without that, I didn't like it. It was just bad. I gave it a 2.5 originally, and I think I've already knocked it down to 2. I could be convinced to go lower. Honestly, the more I think about this book, the less I like it. It's just bad. Skip it. Then the next book I finished was My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, who I've actually seen her books a few times and I've never picked them up. My friend convinced me to read this one because she was like, I was so confused the whole time. I had to know what was going on. I was like super invested. And I trust her recommendation. We have very similar reading taste. Once I realized I've seen the author's books before, I recall that I've like never had an interest in picking them up. So I thought that was interesting because this, I think I gave a 3. It was solid. Definitely lived up to the I have no idea what's going on the entire time. I did clock a few spoilers or twists pretty early on. Most of them I caught right before they were revealed, so I don't really count that because at that point they're leaving chunks of bread in the form of breadcrumbs for us to figure it out. But I do still feel like, oh, I figured it out before they told me. Even if it's a page, I still did it. But this is like, I think I referred to it as You, but domestic. You don't know the narrator's name, so I kept calling him a variation of things. One of which was not Tobias, because he goes by the name Tobias when he's like undercover, for lack of a better statement. So I would refer to him as not Tobias. Sometimes I got the name wrong. I think I called him not Theo a couple times. You never get his name, and I don't think that his anonymity was relevant here, but mostly in part because it's almost unrealistic the number of conversations he has that his name never comes up. It borders on weird. And no, it's maybe not a necessary plot point to get his name, but it's weird to, it's not, because, okay, we don't know the narrator's name in Rebecca. That's like a huge thing, right? She's Mrs. De Winter. You never find out her real name. This book cannot compare to Rebecca. So I don't know what that was, but it was still fun. Like I had a good time despite my critiques. This is a good time. I didn't know what was going on. And it's fun having a book about the anti-hero. Like that's part of what made You so great. Yes, Joe Goldberg is super messed up and you're reading it in second person and that was all super unique, but you're also reading it from the perspective of a terrible person. And that is what this is. Like this is following terrible people. And that's fun because you're kind of like, I don't want you to succeed, but you're also the narrator. So like there's a piece of me that's kind of rooting for you. So you've got a lot of that going on. And the ending is like, what? Like, what is the ending? So it was fun. I have not read any of her other works, and I honestly don't know that I even plan to, but I get why this one is a little bit more popular. Like, it was fun. And then I finished Mislaid and Parts Half Known, which I also read with the Paleontologist in that other video. I just split that up into 2 reading chunks. That, I mean, it's Wayward Children. It's always going to get a 5-star. So that and Inkblood Sister Scribe. Those are the 2 books that actually did really well this month. And I mean, it's Wayward Children. All I need to do to sell you on it is if you've liked any Wayward Children book, you're going to like this one, but you should read Lost in the Moment and Found first. I think most people read them in order or are caught up, but if for some reason this is your first Wayward Children, make it your second, you know? But I mean, it's, we're following Ancy again. She's finally made it to Eleanor West School. And she's a finder, for lack of any other term. So once the school finds out she can find things, and things includes doors, she's a hot commodity and she doesn't want to be. And there's dinosaurs. That's all I really want to say about it. It comes out in January. It was so good. If you've liked NA, you'll like it. It's great. Then I read The Undeadliest Quest by Jessie Stimpson. Yes, Jessie Stimpson, which is the first in a series. I don't know when the rest are coming out because I'm pretty positive they are independently published. And I found out about it on TikTok. I gave it 3 stars. It's following, well, okay, this book follows 2 boys on a quest to become vampires. The series is going to be kind of chaos, and that is what drew me in. So I don't really have any more information about the rest of the series, but I am excited to see where the author is taking it. But this is basically just a middle grade story about boys who want to become vampires. One feels it's essentially a family inheritance, and the other thinks it's the only thing he can do to protect his mother, who is handling a health crisis. And I shouldn't even really say handling. They're struggling. The family is struggling. So he thinks if he becomes a vampire, even though he will be permanently like 11 or 12, I forget how old they are, he is convinced that sacrifice is worth it so he can help his mother. So we're on this journey with them. It's very wholesome. It's very cute. Honestly, it was a fun time. I read it in one sitting. So if it sounds interesting, the big selling point to me, and I talk about this in a different video that's not up at this point. I filmed them in different orders. But so the point, what drew me in is that she's going to write a couple books that are essentially independent and then have a book that ties them together. So, and then I think there was more branching out after that. But it was a really interesting concept that I haven't really seen done often. I know the Giver Quartet kind of does that. So to me, this is kind of like that, but more, because I've not really looked into Lois Lowry, but I really don't know at the time of publishing The Giver and Gathering Blue if she intended to make it a quartet, because she wrote The Giver. I don't remember how many years passed before she wrote Gathering Blue. And then Messenger and Son came out when I was in past high school. No, Messenger might have been when I was in high school still, because I think I actually read that pretty close. Because my school read Gathering Blue. Everyone like read The Giver in high school. I had to read Gathering Blue, which I loved, but it was odd. Like I had to go out of my way to read The Giver, which feels almost sacrilegious. Like, how did that? It used to be required reading, actually. I think that's why. And by the time I got to high school, they got rid of required reading over the summer, which the nerd in me was like secretly disappointed about. Like, I read more now than I ever have in my life, but I was always a big reader. So I was like low-key disappointed I didn't have to read books for school. Then I reread The Ballad of Song, Birds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, because I had high hopes that I was going to have seen the movie by now. But I reread this, and I will say, my first read in 2020, I hated it. I gave it 3 stars, but I didn't like it. I listened to the audiobook, which I don't recommend. Partially because there's a ton of singing in this, and the narrator was not great with the female voice and was terrible singing in a female voice. Hated everything about that. I don't totally love the pacing of this. It pales in comparison to the entire trilogy for sure. Like, this is the worst of the 4 by far. But on my reread, I liked it a lot more. I had a lot more appreciation for it. I can see, I think in my first one, I felt like it was giving Snow too much of a sympathetic background. And on my reread, I saw how much more, like, I think I understood that was not what was happening. I went into it on my first read a bit expecting that, but on my rereads, I realized how awful Snow was from the beginning, and this was just sort of his downward spiral. Still not my favorite, but the things that I loved most about it was learning about how the games started. I feel like I am just the best capital citizen because I'm so intrigued by the games and how they came to be and how they turned into this insane spectacle that they are, and like the mutts and all of it. Like, it was so interesting, and that is still by far my favorite part. Dr. Gall is insane. And I think some of my favorite parts got left out of the movie, which is unfortunate. But I saw someone pitch a theory of how they could make Snow his own trilogy, with, of course, this being book 1. And then book 2 is the 25th Hunger Games, which is the first quarter quell, because I think everyone is super interested in that, because that is when the citizens had to vote on who was going into the arena. Because yes, I know people want the Haymitch story, but we know enough about that in this perceived trilogy, the 25th games makes way more sense. And that could show Snow as like a game leader, game master. What are they called? That person. And then the third book, I forget which games they placed it at, but pick your favorite victor, set it during that game, and have that be Snow's rise to presidency. Since he was president by Finnick's game, in theory, it would have to be before Finnick. But you know, you could kind of place it wherever you want. But like, that would be a really cool trajectory, I think, if Suzanne wanted to make this a trilogy. But can we also appreciate she is not milking this series for money? No matter how much more we want, she is only writing what she feels need to be written. And I love that. I just wish she wanted to write more. Oh, bye, kitty. Then I read Rouge by Mona Awad, which is my second favorite Mona Awad. Is that sacrilege to not have Bunny in my top 2? It's not. It's my third favorite. I read All Is Well first. That's by far my favorite, and I think I like this more than Bunny. I gave it 4 stars. We're following this woman who just lost her mother, and she gets sucked into essentially a beauty cult. And throughout this beauty cult, you learn about Mirabelle's history with her mother and her history just with beauty in general and what it means to be beautiful. Mirabelle is half Egyptian. Her mother is like porcelain white. So when you look to your mother for a beauty standard, and you look so different from her, it's hard. But it's hard to kind of believe what people tell you when the world isn't reflecting that back at you. So there was a lot of conversations about that, which I enjoyed. And I feel like this got pitched as being this like scathing takedown of the beauty industry, and it's not. I left this thinking I needed more of a skincare routine than I have, which kind of feels like the antithesis of the message. But if you like Mona Awad, it's a fever dream. It's weird. You maybe don't know what's going on the whole time, but she's got the right vibes, you know? It's not her best, for sure. But I definitely do think if you liked All's Well, this is on par with that weird fever dream aspect of it. I think... Is it weird that I think Bunny is less of a fever dream? I have to maybe reread it. Now that I have been told she's working on a prequel, which I have mixed feelings about, mostly on the negative side. Not that I won't read it, because it's Mona Awad, I will still pick it up. But I just feel like Bunny I don't think any of her books need more. Although, maybe a little bit on this one. But overall, it's Mona Awad. If you like her, it's a good one. If you don't, well, I mean, if you don't like her, why are you picking it up? If this is your first Mona Awad, maybe don't. Maybe pick All's Well or Bunny first. I don't think this is a good introduction to her, but it is a good time if you already like her. And the last book I read this month was Cherish by Tracy Wolff, which we established is over there. I gave it 2 stars. Yay! And I hate it. What's the point? That feels awful to say because I loved that series when I started it. But 5 and 6 were not necessary. They really, really weren't. And I can't get into most of my feelings without it being a spoiler. And I already talked a little bit about it in the video that's coming after this video because I talk about series in the next video. I just filmed it first. And at the time I hadn't actually read Cherish, but I complained about the series. Now that I've read it, I hate it more because 2/3 of that book is nothing happening. The last third is when anything happens, and it's on an just illogical timeline. And then there's just MacGuffins. And the series is campy. It's not meant to be taken super seriously. And for the first 4, I was down. I just had a wild paranormal fun time. But even in this universe, that only goes so far, and 5 was too long, and 6 wasn't needed. And yes, I'm curious about the spin-off series based on how those characters were left at the end of 6, but like not enough to want to come back. And one more thing, there's a whole plot point that they tease in Cherish, and you're like, oh, this could be super interesting. Like, I hope they go there, and I hope this is what's going on. And they tease it because I had that thought immediately, and I told my friend, and she was like, I also had that thought. Like, it's there, And then halfway through the book, they're like, just kidding? Remember that thing that you thought? Not at all that. It's actually pointless and not happening. So I hate it. It was pointless. And don't come for me. Like, I'm sorry. It did not need to be that long for how much didn't happen. And it was so repetitive, just like me. Anyway, here is to December being better, although I'm reading a Grady Hendrix and I don't like Grady Hendrix, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that is all I read for November, and I will see you guys in another video very soon. Bye.